Going to be eating a shock dart, but he's able to makes it win anything.
Sam, defend your team because they haven't won.
Oh my God!
Strap yourselves in. It's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah.
Spike defused.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last Press 4 to Defuse episode of the year. We're wrapping up our year, and to celebrate, we decided to finally give Paul the gift of actually being a confirmed full-time host of this podcast. Welcome aboard, Paul.
It's good to be back, and officially this time.
Yeah, you've been on like the last 4 or 5 podcasts, so it was probably pretty tipped at this point. But yes, we have finally found our replacement for Ryan's bald dome. We brought in a slightly fuzzier dome to come on in.
Am I going to lose hair now? Is that how that works? Oh,
wait,
you shaved your head off, so we're good
don't worry
there.
about it.
Yeah, I took the Ryan role. Statistically, now one of you starts
Bull
working
buff.
VCT main desks, and then we have to replace you in a year. So there's a good year
With any luck.
here.
Fucking praying.
Yeah, one of you should be going just fine. But let's dive into this week. Sam, how are you feeling about our year wrap up? I know you know what? I'm just gonna give you like 2 minutes here. Just let us have it. I know you've been holding it in.
No, do you know what? So the biggest thing for me, I actually tweeted about this and I got a bit of hate about it, but I don't like the fact that it was an EMEA grand final. I feel like losing out the tension of the regional rivalry kind of takes away a little of the fun, but also suck it. Just EMEA on top, baby. But like most of NA didn't even make it out of groups. You had your one shining star in Cloud9 who summarily got smacked around a little bit. So yeah, EMEA on top, and hopefully NA can pull their bootstraps back up, because again, that regional tension is so important. Like really surprising to have seen it come from Crew, I'll be honest, but at least there was some of that there.
Sorrow. I come from CS. I don't want EU to dominate another
Feels
region.
So good, man.
To be fair,
Feels
it's
so
not
good.
really EU that actually shines here. I mean, Gambit, CIS region, CNED, Turkey,
That's true. The EMEA part is important,
the
right?
EMEA
You
region.
can't
is
say
like-
EU. You have to say EMEA. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
This is very
I
true.
mean, I don't care about EU. I am an EMEA person, so I'll just keep rubbing that in.
I mean, you're
forever.
not, though. That's the funny thing.
I'm
You're in
really
South
not.
Africa.
Right? She
Well-
said from South Africa.
No. Hang on. What does EMEA stand for? Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Suck it.
Does it?
Yes. That is
Interesting.
literally what EMEA stands for. What did you
Wow.
think it stood for?
I don't know. I never
Not
really thought
that.
about it too hard. Never thought about it too hard, seeing as there is
God.
no actual African involvement in the EMEA region competitively.
Egypt? Anubis?
Yeah, they
Campus
had
Clutch?
a team. That was Campus Clutch.
Yeah.
That wasn't
Yeah, it's
VCT.
Campus Clutch.
Anyway,
It's true.
let's get
I've been
into
there.
it. Let's get into the champs itself now that we've allowed Sam her space to brag. Ascend win it. I mean, goodness. Honestly, I don't think anyone really had this projected. Even
No.
within the EMEA teams, people were looking at Liquid to be the powerhouse. People were looking at other teams, at Gambit as well, to really be that strong contender. I mean, Ascend nearly didn't make it out of groups. Fortunately for them, there was a little bit of cheating from their opponents. So they made it out of groups.
Oopsie.
And I mean, this is a pretty wild storyline for Ascend. They were a team that seemed like they were kind of on the downtrend just a little bit. Am I wrong in thinking that, Sam?
Okay, here's the thing though. That has recency bias painted, slathered all over it. So Ascend had a really good start to the year, and then they kind of started to dip a little bit, but they were looking good towards the end of the year. Then Campus Clutch came around. Not Campus Clutch. What was it? The Red Bull home grounds. That's
Home
the one.
ground? Yeah.
Yeah, and then Gambit didn't do well, and Ascend didn't do well, and everyone was like, oh, they look so terrible. Oh no, what is EU gonna do? We're gonna be so awful at champs. And I was like, really? Y'all are taking the home ground seriously with its wonky format of like, you can just win a best of 5 in 2 maps. You really thought that teams took that 100% seriously, and that was the exact same form that they were gonna be bringing to champs.
I mean,
I
the
had
teams
so many question marks.
the teams that didn't go to champs, I bet they took it seriously. But
Fair enough.
Ascend, Gambit, Liquid, Fnatic, I doubt that they showed anything other than, pug strats, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta understand, gotta save it. Oh man, the winning moment. That's a good moment. That's gotta feel incredible.
I
What
really
I will
like
say
that.
is, go ahead.
Considering that I'm definitely more of an NA boy than an EMEA one, I do like that it's Ascend taking it, because CNED has always been one of my favorite players to watch, and that valley you were talking about with Ascend was just so frustrating as like someone who just likes watching really good Jets play. And I mean, I can't even say it was necessarily CNED's tournament. I think it was like Bone Cold went fucking crazy, dude. He had an insane tournament. Starzo, Zeke, that whole lineup just popped off,
dude.
right?
I like to imagine
the
that
stars
this,
aligned for Ascend to do well.
I like to imagine that the sparkler shower just ruined all of the monitors and PCs on those desks, just like melted everything. Absolutely.
I love how Mike
destroyed
just
them.
like moves away from the actual point because he doesn't want to actually talk about the fact that EMEA won.
I mean, we can talk about it. We can talk about it, absolutely. Let's talk about the
sparklers,
Gambit side of perspective as well, because frankly, they were in such a strong position to close out the series, right? It took the reverse run coming through from Ascend. It was a 3-1 that looked like Gambit was going to be able to close this stuff out, or rather, there was 2-1 and they were going for the counting is hard, but suffice it to say, Gambit, it really did feel like their final to lose at a lot of different points there in the competition, and they managed to lose it. I don't think it's terribly distressing for Gambit, considering we're the second at the first ever world championship, but man, that does put a little bit of dampener on what was looking like a dominant team, frankly.
Here's the thing, though. Like, a lot of people are pushing this narrative that Gambit choked. And clearly there were mistakes made. Obviously, they probably would have won. But Ascend were just that good. I think that, to an extent, the match with Keed was a little bit of a wake-up call. they got knocked down into the lower bracket, and because Keed had used that camera, which we can talk about in a little bit, they were able to replay the last little bit of that map. And I'll be honest with you, if they replay that map on equal footing, most of the players said it themselves, they lose Breeze to Keed every single time.
Yeah.
So that must have been a huge wake-up call, along with all the prep that they've done throughout the year. And so once they secured themselves that kind of winner match, and that's kind of when they realized, okay, now they need to start performing like they have never freaking performed in their lives. And in that grand final, I don't think we've ever seen them look that sleek. They looked incredible. Yes, Gambit made some mistakes, but they didn't choke. They just got hard outplayed.
Paul, thoughts?
I mean, yeah, completely agreed. And it's hard to say that Gambit choked when the last two maps were still like relatively close. Like Split, maybe not so much. Maybe that's where you can argue like maybe some of the nerves was getting to Gambit, and they didn't really look that clean on their defense, which is where you want to look clean on Split as well. But you're like really deep in your map pool at that point. Split isn't a map that Gambit play like a ton of, if I remember correctly. I think they're going to look back on that icebox and wish that they had closed out that overtime a little bit cleaner, right? But it's hard for me to say that this was just like a hard choke at the end of the series. Ascend just played really damn well. Like they brought out Omen and I didn't hate it, right? Like watching that last map, I didn't hate watching an Omen be played on Split, Split of all places. Like, maybe if you brought out Omen on like, no, I would actually hate it pretty much anywhere generally. Now that I think about it. I'll be honest. And Bone Cold made it look all right. I did not hate the Omen there. It still looked good. And like, who plays against Omen anymore? Who's ready for a lot of those plays? Like, right? The paranoias were really just obnoxious. I think it was just a really insane tournament from Ascend. After that one fumbling that got like retconned, they tore through.
We changed the law, boys. We changed the script.
Sometimes you just need a little.
You know when you like film a movie and the movie has like 3 or 4 endings, and then they do like a test with a few people, and they're like, all right, everybody hated this ending, so we're gonna go with this ending. That's pretty much what happened there.
That's Riot. That's Riot. There, they're like, no, gotta keep the heroes in. Gotta keep the heroes in. Speaking of surprising storylines, let's talk about Crew. Man,
yes.
Crew was so impressive, knocking out Sentinels, knocking out Fnatic, getting knocked out by Gambit, but making it a hell of a fight. I don't think anyone expected that kind of a performance from Crew. I don't think anyone expected them to go quite so deep and make such a run. It's really encouraging in general. I mean, you look at X10 as well, who are kind of doing their last hurrah. I think it's really encouraging that so many of the so-called minor regions that were maybe a little bit more of an afterthought at the previous international competition, have just seemingly elevated their level to such a degree. I think that really bodes well for the future of Valorant esports, frankly. Super excited. But let's talk about Crew in detail. You got any thoughts about the Crew here, Paul?
I love it. Sam knows. I mean, I am biased toward any player I have ever covered, even briefly. And once upon a time, I casted Klaus in South American Overwatch, so I love seeing him succeed. And dude had a crazy turn. Dude was a rock, man. He had. I was looking at his stats. I don't remember his clutch rate off the top of my head, but it was like through the roof compared to a lot of other players like in the playoffs. It was just an insane tournament from all of Crew. And like you said, nobody expected them to be there, and now we kind of do expect them next time, right? Because Crew has been inching ever so forward. Like they barely really played at Reykjavik, if I remember correctly. Then they did a little bit better at Berlin, but had a really tough group. And now that they had a group that they got through, even though they had to get through Sentinels to do it, which in and of itself would have been enough of an accomplishment. If they got 2-0'd by Fnatic in the playoffs, we still would be talking about this as a decent run for Crew. But that last map against Gambit, man, 18-16. You flip a couple coins differently in there in the grand finals instead. What a performance. Kesnet had a crazy tournament. So many of the players on that roster just looked absolutely insane. And it goes to what you were talking about, Mike, with just the global level has just risen dramatically the fact that we've had 3 international tournaments in like basically the first year of Valorant, and these players have gotten their reps through playing against some of the like other, you know, quote unquote better regions, the ones who have at least, you know, been performing in other games similar to Valorant for a really, really long time. It's just done such good work getting other teams up to that same level and making these events competitive.
I will say I've never been so happy to have someone make me eat my own words. Because I remember in the last show before Champs, Paul and I, we were like arguing, you know, about our rankings. And like we were having a heated debate. And it wasn't a case of like who's at the top. It was like, who's in last place? Because I had crew in last. And I think you had them like second to last.
And I was
like,
mad about that. I had crew not, I don't remember where they were. I don't remember. They weren't last. Furia was definitely last.
Much higher.
They definitely weren't lost, but they were like towards the bottom, and they just came through with this absolute hero run. But more to the point of the smaller regions, I love the point that they're proving here, and specifically because we came through 3 Masters events with them not really showing up, and now they performed out of their freaking minds. Okay, yes, some of them did go out in groups. Like Furia didn't want a match, right? We weren't expecting a whole lot there, but we saw, you know, Vikings do quite well, and Team Secret did well, and obviously Keed did incredibly well. If they hadn't, you know, we might have seen a completely different playoff.
Really hard.
Yeah, I mean X10 as well. That's another one where, you know, Paul and I can feel some solidarity there for Patapan, who I believe is actually returning to Overwatch. Which is
rumored at least.
He'll be back in Valorant in like
I think
6
it's pretty
months,
confirmed.
Don't worry about it.
he literally tweeted out afterwards, that was my last official in Valorant. Like,
he'll be back in 6 months
something
when
along
Overwatch
those
dies.
lines.
Don't worry about it.
I mean, I think he's jumping into a corpse going back to Overwatch. I think it's already dead. And
That's
he's
just what I'm saying.
they don't all
here's
know
what
it yet.
it's big brain from Patapan. Here's what he's gonna
Okay.
do. He's gonna play Overwatch,
Alright.
make the money for the season, and then once the season's gone, he's gonna hop back in for the last event on Valorant, and then make that dank skin money again at Champions.
Do you think he's even? I mean,
Perfect.
I just remember. I admittedly haven't paid a huge amount of attention to Overwatch. The salaries were not great in that game for players, as I recall.
It depends.
Yeah,
It depends.
Yeah, it really depends.
it'll be interesting to see
For
how
tier
he thinks
2,
about that
it's
decision in a year. I mean,
in tier 2, it's literally
Let's not
that
even
meme
go
of,
into
you
it.
guys are getting
Let's
paid.
not even go into it.
it.
Also,
Yeah.
I'm looking back. I had crew at 9th, so suck it.
9th.
Okay.
Ninth.
Still not exactly the
That's-
highest rating, but sure, yeah, we'll take
It's,
we'll give
it's
you the victory
definitely
there.
not where they
Better
ended
than-
up, but it's higher than I bet a lot of people
For
had
sure.
them.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Also, I was the only one having X10 get out of groups, just saying.
yeah, no,
Did
you're
I
right
think
about
they
that
would
one.
get out of
Dead
groups
team
like
buff,
that?
man.
No. Am I
Dead
sad
team
about
buff.
Envy?
That,
Yes.
That was literally the Overwatch hopium, though. Can we just be honest about what that was? I see that face.
But here's the thing.
Not Overwatch Hope. It's SEA Hopium. I love my SEA boys. Like
Let-
I've talked to like Dubstep some. He's such a great guy. I love
seems really sweet,
the SEA
yeah.
crowd is just so wholesome.
That dude's been around a long time, Dubstep.
Mm-hmm.
Been a part of esports and CS previously for a long time. I think that one of the things that's really interesting about this, it's got to be Riot have to be like rubbing their hands together at how this played out, right? Because one of the things they're really trying to develop with Valorant, and one of the things that they've been really successful at doing with League of Legends, is making it global, right? Breaking into markets where there's massive audience potential, and markets that traditional FPS haven't necessarily cracked into much. Now, admittedly, for the LATAM and Brazil in specific, there's a huge Counter-Strike fan base down there. Massive Counter-Strike fan base. But having successful teams from that region, having big tournaments from that region, is going to help them pull that audience in towards Valorant as well. And then you look at SEA as well. SEA's never really had the full buy-in from the audience. So having teams like X10, having teams like Team Secret make it out, gives you the chance to build on them. And I think that this is just, like, it's great. Now it's the question is just, can Gambit's success help them actually pull some of the CIS region into caring about Valorant? Because then Riot's just holding all the cards.
And I think it already has to an extent, right? I mean, you go back to that Gambit crew match, it peaked at over like 1 million viewers, right? Like that's pretty insane for first year on the block. having the semifinal peak at over 1 million viewers. I don't think that the final ended up being as high because it ended up being like, EMEA versus EMEA. So you don't get like quite as much of that same viewership. But like that's still pretty damn good. I remember before this, a lot of people, there was talk online like, will we be able to even do that in the finals of anything, especially with 4 EMEA teams making the playoffs. But I think the viewership's already starting to boost the heck up there. And if the quote unquote minor region teams, I mean, it's hard to call them that at this point, but the smaller regions at the very least, we can
minor
say,
region, you mean NA, right?
I want to talk about that in a second. Yeah, we're gonna dive into that. Don't worry, I'm not sparing myself that pain. That's next on the docket.
But if some of the less known regions before this year can keep performing, I think the viewership is just going to continue to boost.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive into it, Sam. Since you broached the topic, NA Pain, NA Pain. Sentinels don't make it out of groups. Envy don't make it out of groups. Cloud9 make it out of groups, and then immediately come up against Liquid. Which, holy cow, that was a bad draw. I really do want to believe that if they hadn't run up against a strong Liquid team in the first round, like they might have been able to do some more. But that one really sucked as an NA fan, man. I had so much hype coming into this event, and we just shit the bed and rolled around in it. Whoa.
I will say that, like, when I was talking about the whole recency bias thing, and so, like, with Sentinels, there was, like, this complete opposite effect, where, like, everyone completely ignored what happened in Masters 3, and they were like, no, they've had 4 months or whatever, and now they've brought Raucus on for like 3 weeks. They're gonna come back and they're gonna be, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Where is this hopium coming from? Like, I love the Sentinels players. I have my Sentinels jersey. I brought it with me all the way across country. Like, I was ready for Sentinels to do well, and then they didn't. I was hoping they would at least get out of groups, and they couldn't even manage that. And I feel like, I'll be honest, I feel like this is a team that might actually see some changes in the new year. God alone knows what that change could possibly be, because these are some of the best players, but something's got to give.
I will say, in Sentinel's defense, just a little bit, they still definitely shit the bed. But in Sentinel's defense, in retrospect, they were in the group of death.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
With Crew and Liquid in there, and them as well, they were in the group of death. That was a abnormally hard group in retrospect. Should they still have made it out of groups? Yeah. I mean, ideally for the NA hope, right? And it is difficult looking at their roster, right? Like, what do you do to that roster? Because every single player there is either like pushing best in slot in NA, or is bringing you a lot of attention at the very least, right? And probably a lot of sales to go along with it. So it's rough to be a Sentinels fan in the near future, and especially with VCT literally right around the corner, right? We have like a month and a half before the next VCT quals. You don't have a lot of time to do it. A lot of other teams have been making moves and snapping up some of the best free agents while you've been worrying about champions, right? So who's left on the market for you to even consider switching out at this point?
A real coach. I'm just going to say this. Raucus came in as a player. Like, I even understand the argument for like why they want to do it. I was listening to a Sean Garrett's interview where he was talking about why he understood it from his perspective, which is basically that Shazam didn't want someone to come in and be like, here's how we're going to do things, my way or the highway, here's my system.
Yeah,
he wanted someone to come in and complement his system and his voice. But look, just situations that happen there, right? The whole Zombs battling Brazil thing, like, I get it,
That was funny.
I understand it from one perspective, which is that
somebody
his
should have
teammates
put
were
a muzzle on him, dude.
Well, so here's the thing. I want to think that from Zomb's perspective, there was an element of Brazil's going after my teammates. Let me make myself a lightning rod so everyone's just going after me. But at the end of the day, it's still a distraction. It's still something that you don't need to be focusing on. You don't need to be tweeting. You don't need to be fucking streaming while you're competing at the World Championship and doing all this stuff and like focused on your interactions and impressions. Like, that's not the focus. That shouldn't be the focus. And I can get it from, Shazam wants to be able to helm the IGLing and the system and all that shit. But you need an actual coaching staff who can get people focused up, who can get people's minds right, or like focused, like just some sort of support structure. That's not, we brought our buddy Raucus along to give ideas. Like, he's not a coach. He can be a good teammate. He can be a good idea for him, but he doesn't have experience from the mental side of things, from the personal side of things of corralling people into coaching. Like, there are things and challenges and difficulties specific to the coaching role that have nothing to do with what strat you're going to run in the server. And I don't think Sentinel's adequately prepared for that. And I think in the biggest moment of the year, they maybe could have used some extra help in that. Now, like, I think that they have had a very cavalier attitude of, we don't need a coach. We've been winning. We don't need a coach. Our system works. But I think that ignores the fact that as the stakes get higher, as the spotlight gets brighter, as 1 million people are watching the game or whatever, the stakes change. The mental aspect of the game becomes so much more important. And it's been important in any esport. The mental is huge, right? Once you get to the top end, the mechanical skill divides shrink. Right? You can't just rely on yourself to outskill. It's about strats. It's about mental. It's about that. And so many teams have invested in their support structure. So many teams have invested in bringing on analysts, coaches, assistant coaches. And Sentinels was like, yeah, we'll bring Raucus. Put him in a blazer. He's a coach now. Like, it's just not a plan. It's not a real plan. I understand the argument. I understand the idea behind it, but I think it clearly wasn't the antidote. And so if I'm Sentinels, I don't think you need to make a player change. I don't think you need to make a personnel change, right? Shazam's been amazing. Tens has been amazing. Like, Dapper and Sick have been amazing. Shams baits Brazilians. No, he brings a valuable aspect to the team. I don't think you look at this roster of 5 and go, this isn't a skilled enough roster to win.
Yeah.
I think you look at the situation around them, the circumstances around them, and you say, how can we improve that? How can we make this a more stable structure? How can we make it so that our players are focused up so that they can give their best performance every time they're in the server? And I think that's where Sentinels as an organization failed this year. Because I think they had lightning in a bottle. I think they had all the momentum and power, and I don't think they put the structure around the team to sustain it. Sam, I saw you ready to hop in with a point.
Yeah, just on the topic of coaches, there are 2 other teams that I feel like their new coaching staff deserved special mention. One of them is, of course, Anders, friend of the show. Fnatic was like the cleanest team on Fracture by far.
The only clean team on Fracture.
Exactly.
Like, other than, you can make an argument,
like they knew what they
maybe
were doing.
Gambit at the end was clean on Fracture, but how much was that Gambit being clean and Ascend just flopping the bed on that last Fracture map?
Exactly, yeah.
You know, Fnatic was the only team that played Fracture more than once and looked good every single time.
And the thing is, like, with Anders, after Anders joined the team, they played, I think, 1 or 2 tournaments, if I'm not mistaken, and they didn't have great results, but I feel like those were great, like, testing grounds for him to see in action what needed to be done. And all things considered, they did freaking well in Champs, considering they're a team that realistically didn't deserve to be there. They were there because Gambit won Masters 3. Let's call a spade a spade. But they performed exceptionally well. And the other team whose coach I believe deserves a shout out is Ascend. We actually spoke a few weeks before Champs about how one of their analysts had left the team. It was like 2 minutes before Champs was about to start, and Milan stepped in. Now he, if I'm not mistaken, is of the old oh god, what team was he with? 10 Star. He was with 10 Star. And he left 10 Star after a while, and he joined Ascend quite recently. And even the players were coming out in interviews and on social media and saying what he has brought to the team has been exceptional. So I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Mike. Like, one person coming in a more structural capacity, so like not an actual player, but someone providing some sort of structure to the team, can make all the difference in the world. And I believe there's another example coming up shortly on our run of show.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that. I also want to give a shout out to Gambit Structure as well. Eng coming in as their head coach, and I know that Gambit as an organization is an org that's put a lot of emphasis on coaching and structure. The owner of the org has coached at various times in League of Legends, in CS, like in a bunch of different esports, and I think places great value on coaching and structure. I think that that's one of the most obvious philosophical changes between the regions, if you look at it, is that EU and EMEA have put a lot more resources around their teams and emphasize coaching and building up a system, which we haven't necessarily had in NA to the same degree. So yeah, let's talk about Envies, because that's the
I was just about to say cough Envy dropping Mike's HP after
Chet killing another team.
So many question marks around that one.
again,
Where to begin?
you have a resume of
Yeah.
why do teams keep bringing in Chet? He hasn't had success in Valorant yet. Arguably, most of the teams that he's joined have underperformed. I don't know if you can really include TSM in there because obviously those problems were before and after Chet, and there's a whole systematic problem there. But he comes in because he's got personal relationships with the players, most likely. I know he had a close personal relationship with FNS before joining Envy. I know he had a close personal relationship with Hayes before joining TSM. He's got a resume back in CS, but it hasn't translated here, and it frankly hasn't translated. It's not been a shining resume for a long time. He gets brought in. Mike's doesn't get offered the position after getting Envy so far in the last Masters event and being strung along by the team. And that's, again, they weren't giving him a contract. He'd been working with them since the summer. Like, that's insane that they're not willing to value the support structure. And then you're like, we're going to ask you actually to be the analyst. It's ridiculous. You know, he had success with it. I don't know what kind of credit you want to give to Mike's as an individual versus Ches, but it's turnover at the coaching position where you're like, we've had our best result ever. So let's change up the system that got us there.
Right? It doesn't make any sense, dude. And it feels like Envy's just throwing darts at a board with coaches, right? Like every event, like I wouldn't be surprised if after this event, like we're gonna find out in a week that they're gonna have a new coach for first round of VCT, right? Like there needs to be some sort of stability. They need to bring in somebody who actually knows what they're doing. It's just kind of a mess. I feel like Envy definitely. If we're talking about, like, if we're looking at the 3 NA teams, right? Sentinels underperformed. Yes, there's an argument there that maybe they had a harder group that they were anticipating. I think that they were maybe being greedy, too, in a couple of their map pick bans. They didn't expect Crew to come out, and, you know, that bites them in the ass, and they lost. They were the worst team on the day, absolutely. I still think Sentinels is at least okay moving forward. Cloud9 had a way better performance than not than anyone anticipated. They looked pretty good going into the event. But at least, like, better than they had a right to, being the team that came in from the last chance qualifier, right? That, quote-unquote, barely made it in. Envy is the team, I think, most in shambles out of the 3 NA teams that actually went to Champions. And they need a solid coach, and I think that they could stand a couple of changes on their roster, if I'm not gonna lie.
So here's my thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Because this doesn't directly apply to Envy for obvious reasons, but I feel like most teams in NA have been playing musical coaches or musical staff.
Musical a lot, but yeah, coaches definitely.
Yeah, just musical stuff. And yes, Mike, you kind of hit on the point about how EU has put a lot of time and effort into, coaching staff and support staff and whatever. But at the same time, like, at what point do you know that you've got the right person? NA is dead. You should have put crab, not sad face. How do you know that is the right fit? I'm just waiting for Cody to straight up mute me.
He might. I think this has been a systemic problem for NA, and not just in Valorant, but in that other game I cover, CS. Coaching is very tough to quantify in esports, right?
It is.
It's hard to quantify because a lot of organizations, a lot of players don't necessarily know. Like, if they don't come from maybe a more traditional sports background where you've got like decades of coaching mantra and history and books and tomes, like there's a lot of literature out there about human psychology and about coaching and things like that. But how do you translate and implement that, and how do you get a leader? And frankly, you see it in traditional sports as well, where like somebody gets a coaching gig and you're like, this person's going to be brilliant for the job. Of course they're a natural fit. And then they suck at it. Like, it's just a different thing. It's a hard thing. We see it all the time with coaches in charge of, multi-bazillion dollar franchises where they fuck up. It is a hard thing, and the person you think will be a good coach isn't necessarily going to be that, and the guy you think might suck at coaching might honestly be a brilliant leader of men. It's hard to quantify until someone actually gets a chance. But you're right, teams do just seem to be like, you try it. Did it work? Nope. You try it now.
All right, next.
And I think the problem is also that a lot of NA just left it to too late, right? You want to be figuring out if your coach works in Masters 1 or Masters 2 when you're winning things. And it's like, okay, this system's working here. This is good. We can continue to build on this. You don't want to be like, yeah, we picked someone up 3 weeks to go to the Grand Championship. This is our coach
Sentinels.
now. We have a coach. But I mean, even Envy as well, right? Like, it's such a weird time to be making a coaching change. it just doesn't give yourself a proper time to build upon it. And I get that it's hard. I get that it's difficult. But I also think that there's players who don't want to be coached, right? Which is a certain element of that word that everyone loves, which is ego. Where, especially if you've been winning and you view yourself as on top, you're like, who's going to come in and tell me what to do, right? Because you don't have... So in a more established esport, like back in CS, where you've got 20 years of history, you have former pros who've done it and been there and then transition into coaching, where they're going to inspire respect because those are the guys that current players grew up watching. And you had that to some degree, with like Fraud coming in. He's a guy with a long history of competition, and that's one reason why he can sort of demand respect. But a lot of coaches in Valorant don't necessarily have that. Especially a guy like Mike's doesn't have that to draw on. And so it's a question of, how do you get buy-in from players? How do you establish that buy-in? How do you establish that respect? And it can be tricky without a resume to cite. But I don't know. It's something that needs to be solved. And to my eyes, it is the biggest problem with the North American region right now. I mean, even you look at Cloud9, the most successful team there. They've got James IRL. They've also got Autumn. Like, they've got a coaching structure. They've got 2 coaches. 2 of them? What? And they
Bro, that's crazy. Slow your roll, Mike. We can barely figure out 1 coach on a lot of our teams. 2 is pushing it.
And I mean, I don't know as much about Autumn, but James IRL, I certainly know a lot about his resume and what he's done before and the kind of respect he's commanded from his players, because he's a guy who, to my knowledge, from what I've heard from former players of his, really values preparation and time in and brings a lot to the table. And I think, in my eyes, Cloud9 is the best positioned team to build on their success in 2022. Yeah. And I know that's probably the most sleeper pick, resident sleeper statement take, because they went furthest, but genuinely the structure and the way they've built that team inspires faith in me in a way that I am very nervous for what Sentinels and Envy are going to do in the new year.
And the players of Cloud9 feel better than they ever have. Like, Mitch was talking before Champions about how he feels this is the best roster that Cloud9 has ever put into a tournament. Right?
I mean, he did put that robe pick out there, and I think he just got the sex appeal buff, Just that pick was just too powerful. True. I don't know if we can, Cody. You probably don't want to bring that up on stream. We might get banned. There's too much sex appeal in that one picture.
But then, on the other side of the coin, I would hate to be trying to pick a winning horse from EMEA because everyone just looks so damn good. Like, the level of competitiveness. Just shut up.
Oh, we have too many good teams. How do I hold all these competitive rosters?
Oh no, I'm gonna drop all of my good teams and play. You know what? That's what's gonna happen. It's gonna be like League of Legends again. We're just gonna buy all the EU players. That's how we make NA good.
It's already starting. Starting.
Wait, yeah, that's not on our rundown, but NA is starting to freaking import EMEA IGLs.
Yep, I've got it in there.
It's already. Oh, is it on there?
I've got rhyme rumors. I've got the rhyme rumor in there. We'll get there. We probably do need to get there a little quicker.
As well, there were like a few people. Yeah, we should
probably
keep moving. Oops.
All right, I think we've done enough NA bashing here. There are a lot of worrying signs. There's also some promise, but there's definitely some very worrying signs. I don't think that if you're Sentinels or Envy, frankly, you need to hit the absolute panic button here and just, yeet and try and totally rebuild.
Don't nuke the rosters.
I think you've got...
No, seriously, if you were in Champs, you've done pretty damn well.
Yeah, I think you've got really strong rosters. I don't think you look at those 5 players and go, we need to change here. I think it's genuinely the structure and the leadership needs to shift within the rosters, and to my eyes, that's the way it goes. Especially with Envy's run, that team's been a head case, right? They were always the head case in NA competition, where it's like we'd get to a certain point and then just suddenly look way worse than we have all tournament long. That was perpetually Envy's problem, and they did it again.
They do what?
They shit on X10 in the first matchup. They shit on them in the first matchup. 2-0'd them, and it didn't look particularly close. And then they come up against them in the decider where everything's on the line, and it's suddenly like, I can't close out a round on Haven. What's going on? It's such an Envy way to lose. All right, anyway, I'm gonna move on from that, because I'll go right back down this rabbit hole, and we don't have time for it. But build around your existing rosters is my thing. That is what I really want to see. I want to see emphasis
and
in
on
coaching.
The first point that you're about to head into. On that note.
There it is.
Thumbs out. This is EMEA. You can make moves here. As you said, Fnatic basically didn't belong in that tournament. Got lucky. And they did make a run into the playoffs. So nicely done there. You know, looking good in their group.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I mean, Sam, you'll probably know. I mean, you'll at least heard more about behind the scenes stuff. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but considering how quickly this was after Champs, it feels like this was maybe a move that Fnatic have been considering for a little bit at the very least. You know, it was like 4 days or something after they lost where this was in writing, right?
I feel
Sorry, go.
I just feel like Doma was one of the players who was a good supportive kind of in the background, but I think they're looking for something a little bit more. You know, when you think about Fnatic, maybe not necessarily flashy, but just more. I don't know how else to put that. Like when you think Fnatic, the first name that pops into your head is probably Boaster because he's a clown. But then like shortly thereafter, it's not going to be Doma. In fact, he's probably the person that once you've gotten through the first four, you go, fifth player, who was it? I mean, he's that guy. And he has some really good standout moments. He's performed incredibly well. He definitely deserves to be on a team right at the top. But I think given what Fnatic are clearly shooting for, they need something more. Right, playoffs is not good enough. Okay, bearing in mind that they did exceptionally well to get that far, given that, once again, they weren't necessarily meant to be there in the first place, but it's still not enough. I mean, we talk about this all the time, particularly with orgs like Complexity and Immortals in NA, where they're like consistently in that like tier 2 level, and we're like, this is not where these orgs want to be. And for Fnatic, it's a similar thing. Like, they don't want to just be playoffs. So what I was saying about Sentinels and about how there might need to be a change, I feel like for any team, yes, you were in Champs, so your team is clearly good enough. But Fnatic are just like, well, we don't want to just be good enough, right? We want to excel. Sure. So there you go.
Yeah.
I do want to
I think this also... Oh, go for it, Mike.
I was just going to say a quick aside here because I realized we forgot to talk about it when we were talking about champions. Vision Strikers, please let Lakia play the game. Please.
Seriously.
Just let him play maps. All right. That's all I wanted to put in there. We just hadn't touched on Vision Strikers. Moving on. Back to Fnatic. Back to your point, Paul.
My last point on Fnatic was just going to be, I think this just speaks that they were happy with Anders' coaching too, right? You know, they obviously fallen out of quarters of champions. Quarters of champions is no small feat, don't get me wrong, but for a roster with such like a massive fan base, generally speak, like Fnatic's a huge org, especially in Europe, right? And they're playing to the European base with Valorant too. You want to be pushing toward the top of the scene. So this just speaks that, hey, we brought in Anders, did pretty well. That's not the change we want to make to go from 4th place EMEA to 1st place EMEA. It's one player off the roster. If they can keep it at just one, not suddenly get rid of 3 more players in the next month. I think that this is potentially a good change for Fnatic if they can bring somebody in, like you were saying, that just has maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll have to get the scoops. But obviously that coaching staff, many Anders, there's a plan in there. Let's keep moving on because, as always, we're gonna run over time. The Guard have finalized the roster, and I'm kind of interested in this roster. I need to hit MC up in the DMs to get a little bit more of answers here. But I am very intrigued by this roster. Right, it is now they added Jonah P and Seiya Playa to finalize it. They've got Valen, Solm, and name that I'm blanking on. Net. Coming in, and I saw MC on Reddit talking about roles there as well. I'm pretty interested in the Guard here.
What did he say the roles would be?
I'm pulling up the things so that I don't miss it. Seiya is going to be Jet. I think it was Jonah P, secondary duelist.
Okay, that's exactly what I wanted. We were talking about this. We were talking about this lineup a couple weeks ago on the show, right? Valen should be playing Sova, right? I mean, that's pretty much all he's ever played.
No, Valen was playing Viper.
I thought Valen was a Sova. Oh, no, wait. Who the hell am I thinking of?
No, it's Psalm is Sova.
Yeah, he should definitely be.
That makes more sense.
Psalm is going to be your Sova. So it's Seiya's Jet, Jonah P, secondary duelist, Psalm is your Sova, Valen's your Smokes, Net Sentinel. That's from MCE on Twitter or on Reddit.
That sounds amazing.
That's exactly what I want. We were talking about this 2 weeks ago, and if I remember correctly, what I was saying is like, this is a really good like backline. All you need is 2 flashy duelists.
Mm-hmm.
Jonah P. Saya player, those are some good fucking flashy duelists, dude. I was so mad. I was so mad at T1 when they like signed Saya player and they bring him out and he's on like Omen. I was so angry. I was like, bro, you have one of the most cracked aimers in any game, and you put him on fucking Omen. What are you doing? You want him
Wait,
on
did he
entry.
change his
want,
name
like,
back to Saya player?
Yeah, he did.
Wasn't
He's
he-
done with
Oh,
Spider.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
In back with the
Okay,
guard, he's
that's
back to
probably
being
for the
Saya player,
best.
which is also great
Okay.
because Spider was just like, you sound like a cheap sports car, man. Like it's just not as cool. It's not as unique
I
either.
do-
I can't imagine
I
the
do
SEO
like
on
Saya
it.
player is definitely more unique. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, this is just so good, right? Jonah P has been really good. I think he was one of the standouts when he was playing on like Immortals, right?
Mhm.
Despite the problems that roster had, I never hated Jonah P's performance. I think this makes Guard like a serious competitor. I think that they can actually look to be playing pretty decently in the next VCT. Like if you haven't scrimmed this team and you don't know what they're doing, I think the Guard is going to make a serious case against a lot of the tier 1 rosters.
I mean,
Probably, yeah.
they've got the Cronky bag behind them, right? They got mad money coming in
True.
here. I know that they've
True.
signed these guys to my knowledge, very competitive contracts as well. So I was kind of curious to, with everyone talking about like, oh, buyouts are impossible to move players around, like what kind of roster they would actually assemble. And this one's, it seems pretty prime considering what was out there. As Sam will know, I am the #1 MCE stan, their coach.
Yep.
So I'm just very excited
Valid.
to see what Matt can do with this roster.
I too
'cause
am a big fan.
He's always been able to maximize talent out of rosters. You saw him do it with Gen G as well, where he really maximized the talent of that roster, and they seem to have some major performances. And I am very curious what the Guard's going to be able to do, where they've got their set 5, they've got their coach, they're coming in from the beginning of the year. Clearly, there's a vision and a long-term plan, and they're ready for it. Like, this is not the kind of entry you make into a franchise or into an esport where you're like, we're gonna think about
They
signing
didn't
this
half-ass it.
unsigned team or this
Yeah.
kind of thing. They built a project, and there's clearly some resources behind it. So very curious to see how this roster is going to perform. I'm very excited for the Guard in 2022. Moving on here, Mod is out of Andbox, which is, I mean, look, the Andbox revolving door is just going to continue. We knew they were going to make changes going into this year because they do. But that Andbox team, it's disappointing for the organization, right? Because it felt like they had such positive momentum at the beginning of this year, right? Competition in January and everything. We were looking at them and going like, this is going to be the next big team. They just never got over that hump, and then players moved on, changes came through, and they've never really been able to capture that momentum in a big way again. Do we have hope for them in the new year?
Glad we're on the same page about that, at least.
No, seriously.
I don't know. They've been like messing around in some of the like the NSG opens, right? Just like with their roster.
Messing around.
I mean, pretty much, right?
Might
Well,
fuck
like
around and
they
play
got a lot of their
open.
roster to figure out now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've only got 2 signed players,
yeah.
I think.
Exactly. It's like who is it? Mummy and Vice?
You are correct. It is Vice and Mummy.
It's Mummy and Vice? Yeah.
So you've got your
okay.
collar and your opper.
Hey,
all
look,
you
I'm
need,
actually
really.
signed on this show. I need to at least vaguely know what I'm talking about now. They did like okay yesterday in like the NSG Open. The roster they were playing with is interesting, right? They had like Quinn going in there. I really like Quinn. I think Quinn has just looked better and better over the last few months.
Yeah.
Harmful is an interesting pickup in theory, but like it's getting down to the wire for them to actually
But
figure out their
Harmful
roster,
isn't a
right?
pickup. There's so much drama
Yeah,
around that.
They signed him
signed
and then
him
they
and then,
didn't
like-
sign him.
Exactly,
Yeah,
but he's still
basically.
playing with them. I mean, like
Bit weird.
it's getting down to the wire for Andbox, right? And they still played with Mata yesterday too, right? So or maybe it wasn't yesterday. Maybe this. I'm sorry. This was last week. My bad.
Oh.
I was looking at last week's results, not yesterday's. I don't think they played yesterday. But you know, it's
Well, with 2 players, I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't even know if they have enough of a roster to play.
well, I mean, they've been pugging out the rest of the roster anyways, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Might as well add a third. Yeesh.
God.
It's just I feel like Inbox they lost like way back when they lost like Android to like a better buyout, a team with more money, and they just never recovered from that. Not really.
I mean, they had Ye for a while, and then Ye got sold up,
and then they lost him to a bigger buyout and a better org.
I mean, yeah, they've moved on their stars, right? They haven't been able to field the roster around them, and they've moved on their stars to higher tier competition. Yeah, it's tough to render any judgment on what Ambox is going to do because we don't know what they're going to do. They've got 3 spots to fill. We'll see what kind of roster they build coming into 2022. Moving on, Odorous is out of version 1. We kind of knew this was going to happen because it was rumored. He played like 1 event with them, and right after they signed him, they benched him. So my only hope is that he's not being put in contract jail, if that is true, and that his buyout is very friendly and agreeable because you signed the guy and then you benched him immediately. I don't know what the hell happened.
I have so many questions about that. Like, don't you trial a player first? How do you trial a player for X amount of time, sign him, play 1 official, and then go,
well,
actually, nah.
They bought him out from
what?
Pioneers, right? So I don't know if they would have necessarily had a trial because he came direct from that roster.
I thought he was playing with them for like a month beforehand, though.
I think he was playing for them like a month before it was announced, but he had you don't buy out a player and have them play with you, right? Like he signed immediately, pretty much is the way it works, I think, because they paid his buyout, I assume, and bought the contract. But they just took a while to announce him, and then they didn't really play anything, and then I don't know, weird situation all around. Kind of disappointing as well because Pioneers seem to have some really nice momentum around Odorous, and then Odorous goes to this other project, and then this other project
Pioneers are doing fine though now.
Yeah, their new roster is spicy.
It's the master plan. You yoink a player from another team to make them weaker, and then you just bench him. It's a terrible idea.
It's more like Pioneers
get the
bag for Odorous, and then they use it to sign a really nice roster.
Honestly.
I am curious to see where Odorous winds up, or if he winds up, because there's been a lot of talk about buyouts.
He's been bouncing around.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about buyouts in Valorant already being egregious in North America. I know George Geddes has tweeted some stuff about that and reported about it. And so you really hope that players like Odorous, who have just been put on the bench, aren't going to be limited from being able to compete. Yeah, I don't know. I really would love to know the story behind what the hell happened there with version 1. I don't know. Don't have any clue at this point. Zachary out of FaZe is our next one. As again, gonna have to keep it rolling here. We're gonna have to start going real quick.
Just nuked their team.
Yeah, FaZe.
Yeah, I mean, FaZe has just dropped everyone at this point.
They're apparently just building around Baby Bay
elsewhere. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we'll see where he ends up. Moving on. I don't know if there's anything to talk about there.
There's not much else to say about the FaZe stuff. Like, they're nuking their team. It's
Here's a great one. Nitro's coming back to CS, confirmed. Woo!
Going back to the dead game.
Captain America coming back to Team Liquid. Hell yeah. He's out of 100 Thieves, so 100 Thieves is decidedly in a rebuild at this point, right? You've lost. Steel left the team. As part of it being that Nitro was taking over the IGL duties. Now Nitro's out. Now it's time to figure out who's your IGL now.
Yep. I don't know. I suppose it's Rostamania, right? And it's worse than usual Rostamania because it's year-end Rostamania. So everything's up in the air at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 100 Thieves did something wrong, man. like they scared away a lot of really good players that were coming over from Counter-Strike. For Nitro to leave Counter-Strike, enter into Valorant on such a huge team, and then just do it like a hitter and quitter, and just one and done. All right, I saw Valorant. I'm good. Back to CS I go.
In fairness to 100 Thieves, I think that's very much more about Nitro wanting to go back to CS. He talked about it, posted an explanation of himself, I think on Reddit, somewhere in there. But basically what he said is he watched an event and realized he wanted to go back to CS. So I'm just saying the major just brought Nitro back.
Fair enough.
Legitimately, I think the guy watched the major and went, shit, I'm not done with that game. and I think that was less about what was going on in Valorant and more just that he looked at it, knew he had an opportunity to come back to Liquid, or that was a possibility, and realized that he had unfinished business and wanted to compete in CS. And at the end of the day, like, it's like, you know, Michael Jordan going back to basketball kind of thing. Like, you're not going to be able to stop the guy from doing the thing.
The king has returned, you know.
It's just when the move is there, the move is there. It's definitely not what 100 Thieves were planning on. So I'm sure they're like,
nope.
All right, adjust, audible. But it is going to be very interesting to see how they try and shift the leadership duties on that team and who they bring in to replace. Moving on, Cloud9 have an academy team now. Cloud9 Academy C9. So now this is their third Valorant roster.
Yes.
Damn, Cloud9 just.
Also, Poise on the academy roster? Question mark.
Got to put them somewhere. Still under contract, right?
Yeah, I mean, this academy roster is actually pretty sick, right? Like Poise, Ren's, Instinct, like those are three pretty good players, right? Well, and it makes me wonder if C9's actually going to use their academy roster as an actual academy roster, and like and not just team. Like, oh, we have a B team. Mm-hmm. You know what? You know, like, you know, if you go over to like a game like League of Legends, right? Like, depending on the week, teams will sub in their academy players into like big matches that they're like expected to win, just so that they can get some play time, or maybe they'll have like issues with like a player that week. They'll be sick and they'll use their academy team as like a sub roster. Like, I don't know how rules wise that works in Valorant, because it's very like particularly structured to work that way in League of Legends, whereas Valorant, like 6 months ago, a year ago this time, it was like, oh, can't have more than one roster competing in this tournament.
I still think you can.
It's probably still the case.
I don't think you can in VCT.
Unless it's like a female team.
I think an academy
team
like, cedes their ability to compete in VCT, yeah.
Yes.
Which also adds to a bit of the weirdness, because it feels like a lot of this roster would want to compete in VCT. So, yeah. A little bit funky, but at the end of the day, I like this team. I think it's a really cool team, and a cool place if Cloud9 can divert some of their like big org resources into growing a lot of these players, right? Then we're talking about, you know, those egregious buyouts that we were talking about before. They can start selling a few of these guys off to other teams, and it's just a good investment.
I will also say one name that I'm very excited for, that I'm very interested to see what he does, is Aircast. You two probably have never heard of Aircast. He's a Mongolian CS player who's decided to transition over to Valorant. He spent some time competing.
I'll be honest.
Well, so he was a student in Australia. Yeah, if you had heard of him, I would be very surprised. He was a student in Australia.
I just love how, like, you're like, this one player, right? It's this guy. And Paul's like, yeah, sure. And you're like, I don't think you know who he is. Nope, not a clue.
Yep.
No, I said sure because I trust Mike's opinion, Sam.
Thank you.
Jeez.
Thank you for validating me. Thank you for validating me here. Aircast is he competed in Australia for a while with the Greyhound roster. That's now the Renegades roster. He was really impressive then. Couldn't stay because of visa issues. So he went back to Mongolia, competed with a squad there, made some waves, but has decided to transition over to Valorant and come over to the US to compete as well. And I am very interested to see how quickly he's going to adapt to the new game, because he's a dude who had oodles of talent and just geographically didn't have the opportunities he really should have. So this is a huge opportunity for him. Moving on, we got a couple more things to talk about, and we're going to go so quick now. Rhyme is rumored to sign with Gen G and come over for them, which is kind of wild. So that's Rhyme, who was previously part of Ninjas in Pajamas. That we're importing EU talent this early on. Yeah, fundamentally, I think that's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's pretty bad that it's happening this early, but apparently a lot of teams are looking into EU talent, particularly IGLs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also, when was the last time we heard Gen G's name? Like, I cannot think of the last time
when MC got
in
let go.
NA Valorant I heard Gen G exist. They have been so quiet. It feels like they have been asleep at the wheel for the last like 5 months, and then realized 2022 VCT is around the corner, and they're like, "Oh shit, better sign some players." Oh no, all the NA ones are gone. Quick, import EU, quick.
Holy dude. I mean, they were in LCQ, so it's not like they've been MIA for 6 months.
Straight up didn't remember because they flopped out so early.
What happened to I'm on the show now, so I need to know what I'm talking about?
Well, he does. He knows that they haven't been relevant in a while.
I know that they beat Luminosity, who, and then they got beat out by Cloud9. Like, I haven't talked about Gen G in a serious capacity in NA since like toward the beginning of the year.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It
Yeah.
feels like they have been so quiet.
They have. We'll
Like
continue
nobody went into last chance qualifiers and was like, you know who my sleeper pick is? Genji.
Got to keep moving on here. Coldamenta and Trex
Yep,
are two
yep.
guild. I'll give you a chance to talk about that, Sam, since you are the guild stan. Are you still a guild stan at this point with the changes coming through?
I don't know. I was a guild stan because of the package deal that was Bonk.
Mhm.
Now Yassine is gone and he's taken, people with him, and the team is just not who it was before. And I'll be honest, like, Yassine was a big part of why I was a guild fan. You saw the announcement video where he was the Viking on the ship, and he just had so much personality, and I feel like there's a lot of missed stuff there, and we spoke about it when it happened, when they actually decided to leave. I think that Colamenta and Trex are good pickups for Guild overall. I mean, Guild, this is a team that really has had a lot to prove for a long time. They've looked good, but unfortunately just never quite good enough. And they did so well in LCQ. But of course, at that point, Liquid had picked up Nevera. And, well, I mean, geez, they were absolute demons. So the changes, another team with the changes were necessary, but I'm just really sad to see that two of my favorite players are now no longer in Guild. So, a bit of a bittersweet one.
Well, let's talk about the future here. Let's talk about the future, because 2022 is right around the
Let's do
corner.
that.
We've got some details about the
Yeah.
VCT for 2022. We're shifting to 2 Masters events a year, and Champions being in September. The idea behind that being to create a window for third-party TOs to run tournaments from September to December. We've got some details about game changers. Oh, this had already sort of been talked about or hinted about. I know it was known. Maybe it was just rumored and reported. But there's going to be international game changers competition, which does change things around. And we've got some new things about the Valorant Challengers. The Challengers themselves, the qualifiers, have been very much extended to then lead into the Masters. This is kind of interesting. You got any thoughts here, Sam?
Well, so this is obviously specifically the NA one, but with EMEA, it's even a little bit more convoluted because we have the different regions. I think there's like 7 or 8 different regions. So there you
Sure,
go.
you
You
have
got
the
the
regionals.
EMEA picture there. So you start with the amateur circuits right at the bottom. That leads up into the regional leagues, which are divided. So, for example, UK, Ireland, and Nordics is a region. Spain, Italy, and Portugal is a region. And so it goes on and divides itself up, and then from there you get up into challenges and then into masters and champions at the end. Now, what is really interesting about what's happening in EU, now this is specifically happening in the Spanish region. A lot of the regions haven't announced exactly what their formats and things are going to look like, so we don't know if this is going to be throughout the entirety of EMEA. But what Spain has done, it's being run by LVP, who have been running tournaments throughout the year, and they've said 9 of the 10 spots in the VRL, which is the Valorant Regional League, will be given to organizations, Spanish specifically, organizations which have interests and investments teams in League of Legends, right? They are then free to sell those spots to whomever they want if they so choose. So, but like a team like Heretics, for example, is not going to be invited because they don't have a League of Legends team. Then that last spot, remember I said Spain is Spain, Portugal, and Italy. But 9 of the 10 teams are Spanish orgs. So that last spot is some sort of battle royale between the last 3 regions to get themselves into that spot. And then it gets better, folks. The team that gets the 10th spot needs to either already be or become signed to a Spanish organization. This was said by the head of Riot Spain. I've got the clip somewhere, but it's in Spanish, so there's no point in actually playing it. But some of the other Spanish coaches and whatever translated and said, this is what they've said. They want Spain to be Spanish, apparently. And it's just absolutely wild to me that this is how they're deciding to run it. What? How?
I feel like that might not wind up being the final iteration because it sounds absurd when you hear it.
Yeah, no, they're already contesting it.
And I mean, I get the idea of like watching, like if you're going to have regional leagues, they should be locked to those regions, right? That doesn't feel like a way that even vaguely makes sense on how to lock it to that region.
That's also
Um,
like if your region includes multiple countries and you're like, no, but only Spanish. That's not a region anymore.
yeah,
That's a country.
not. Yeah, exactly.
That's a national league.
But also, all of the regions will then have. So they say that, like, I think it's they haven't like some regions are 2 out of 5 and some regions are 3 out of 5 have to be from like a specific nationality or from that region. So I think you can have players from other regions, but there's like a set limit thing, which also does make a bit of sense.
How it
But like
generally
the
is.
whole concept of the regions becomes very difficult because if you're a team that has a player from like 4 different regions, you now have to reshuffle your entire roster because if you don't make it through qualifiers, which start on the 10th of January, and you're forced to go down into the leagues, you now have to change your roster if you have like 4 different leagues or regions represented, which is going to be absolute chaos for those teams. Like, I get the idea behind what they're doing, but it's going to be insane. It's a
To be fair, if you didn't make it
rosters.
through the qualifiers and you did get knocked down to the regional leagues, if you're a big org, you're probably changing your roster anyways.
True.
But that doesn't make it sensible. It doesn't make
Like,
the weird stranglehold situation sensible.
You may change your roster after a loss, but only from these 3 countries.
Yeah,
The rest of Europe is off
exactly.
limits. Like
That's wild.
It's crazy.
It's definitely going to be a challenge. It's going to be interesting to see the way Valorant shapes up. I think the most promising things are the announcements that we've had for Game Changers seem very positive.
Yes.
Yeah, I know
So
you're
psyched.
excited for that, Sam.
I can't wait to see the heat on Twitter. Like, there's already heat on Twitter between like the C9 players and like the 10-star players.
Yes.
Like, who's actually the best in the world? That's gonna be fun to see it land.
Please let NA be good in some arena of Valorant for a sustained period of time.
Please.
Please.
I have
God.
faith in C9 White.
I
have
do
faith in
too.
a lot of
Really-
the NA Game Changers teams, actually.
I have a huge amount of faith
Yeah.
in C9 White.
What's also
No
really great
scam.
about Game Changers is they're now also adding the Academy to EMEA. So there will be
Right.
6 Academy tournaments throughout the year for EMEA. NA have their monthly Academy tournaments. Then there are 3 Game Changers tournaments, the same as exactly the same as we had this year, and they will be interspersed throughout the year. And as far as possible, will not overlap with regular VCT activities, so that those teams are then also able to compete in the main VCT event as well. So, and then of course culminating in the massive LAN at the end of the year, which is so exciting. I can't even I'm so excited.
Right, have really set themselves a delicate calendar balancing act. Speaking of delicate
yes.
calendar balancing acts, we're bad at delicate clock balancing acts. We're like at least 10 minutes over our time at this point. I think we're gonna wrap up. I think
the
we're gonna
usual.
wrap up. Give me your as a way to conclude here, right? Give me your any closing sentiments you have on 2021 and any things you're excited for 2022. Any hopes that you have for the 2022 Valorant year. Sam, you want to go first?
I mean Valander, I like
Valander,
that.
the
Valander.
Valander. Yeah,
That's what we're calling
Yeah.
it now.
Hell yeah. I want to say that Press 4 has been one of the best parts of my entire year. Wednesday is the best day of the week. You should make sure that you're always here, and looking forward to continuing that in the new year with my 2 lovely co-hosts. I think that the future of Valorant is bright beyond belief, and I'm super stoked to be a part of it, both in the past and hopefully in the future. And as this is our last episode of the year, I want to say thank you to all of the viewers who have been along with us on this journey. It's been a little over a year that we've been having these episodes, if a little intermittently. So have a lovely Christmas and a blessed new year, and I can't wait to see you all again soon.
Intermittent? Never. Not us. Not us.
Tangents?
been
Not
done.
us.
Never been done. Not us. Paul, you're very new to this particular production, but any thoughts on Valorant as a whole?
I mean, it's definitely been fun being on this production the last, month and a half, 2 months, whatever it's been now. I mean, I'm excited for 2022. It's going to be a kick-ass year. The first official year of Valorant has been insane, right? Between Reykjavik, Berlin, Champions. I mean, I will remember that Crew Gambit bind match for the rest of my days. You'll catch me raving about that on my deathbed. It's been an insane year for Valorant, and 2022 is just looking legitimately looking actually even better somehow, and I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking back at the year, Riot has clearly put on a hell of a show with esports. Their commitment to the esports side of things and their investment in it is impressive. Obviously, coming from the CS world, it's mind blowing to see the developer involvement that's available to Valorant, and just the investment that's being made in here. And I'm sure it's just going to continue to show success. It's very encouraging if you're a Valorant fan. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what new heights they can get to. I'm looking forward to see my hope for 2022 is that NA figures this shit out and wins the next champions.
Yeah.
That's my big hope,
Good
that we
luck with
don't
that.
lose another damn esport to the rest of the world. Come on, guys, we were dominant. Recapture that flame, recapture that fire. Give me something to rant about to Sam on this show. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. It's been a wonderful 2021 at Press Forward to Defuse. We're going to be bringing you more Press Forward to Defuse action in the new year, but there will be no more shows through the end of the year. So we'll see you in January. We'll see you in 2022, provided we all make it that long. See you next year. Bye-bye, everyone.